Welcome to Just Wanna Quilt, a research podcast coming out of Tulane University Law School, where we explore all kinds of things, stories about quilting, tools, field trips, maybe some famous quilters stop by, and a little bit of copyright thrown in just for fun. I'm Elizabeth Townsend Guard. I'm a law professor at Tulane University Law School, and I just wanna quilt. So today we're talking to Mary Lillico. Mary found us through Leah Day. I was on Leah Day's podcast, and she heard us, and she reached out. So we talk about her quilting life, and she's thinking about buying a long arm, which I'm totally into listening about and chatting about. So we have just fun chatting. I hope you enjoy this. Cool. So before we begin, so we'll talk about your family and your quilting life. Because we are preserving this, can you tell me your name, which I know, but can you tell me your name and where you're calling from?
My name is Mary Lillico, and I'm calling from Amarillo, Texas.
Cool. And how did you find us? Let's start with that, and then I'm going to ask you the question we ask everybody to begin with.
How did I find you?
Yes. How did we connect?
Okay. So it was listening to me. Okay. I started getting on the internet and first of all looking for quilting motifs or quilting patterns, and I was interested in learning about long arm quilting, and so I started following Leah Day, and and awesome. I know that she does a podcast, and right. and I don't, it's like I what do you call it? I loosely follow to see what she's doing, but I'm also working full time. And so I feel like right now I'm not doing a whole lot of quilting, but I like to listen. And I heard you interview on a podcast, and you said that you were into, what do you call it? Copyright. Right, and working with Tulane University. And I thought, well, this is interesting because there's a lot I'll try to figure out and do myself, but then every once in a while I'll see just a really interesting pattern and I can't figure out how to do it myself, so I'll buy the book or I'll buy the kit or whatever, and I go from there.
Awesome. Well, let's start with, what's your first memory of someone sewing or quilting in your life?
Okay, so it would probably be my mother. My mother was quite a sewer, and growing up, we sewed all the clothes. When we go on family vacation, everybody had new outfits, and she quilted, but I think she was about 35, and so I was probably about 10 when she started doing things, and she had said that she thought she'd wait till she was old, but then realized when she was old she probably wouldn't have the time or energy or eyesight to do things, and so she decided not to wait.
That's really interesting. And so what kind of things was she sewing? Was she quilting and sewing, or what was she doing exactly?
So sewing was mostly clothes, but then she would quilt, and I think it started out with quilts for the church bazaar, and so it would be gifts. And, and it wouldn't be all the time. It would just be sometimes, and she had quilting frames, and so they'd be stretched out in the other room, and and she would be working on it, and I would come and go and work on it some, but not a whole lot.
And you said that it wasn't just your mom that quilted, but that you come from a long line of people that quilted. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, my great-grandmother.
Yeah.
My grandmother, so she was, I'm trying to think how old she was. I don't know. I know she probably died in 1970. And she was about almost 90, but so she always would sew her clothes, and her mother was she wasn't a Danish immigrant. Okay, so she was a Danish immigrant, but basically they were seamstresses and they sewed. And so it was with the scraps that they had that they would make quilts with it. So they would cut it up and make designs. And actually, some of the quilt patterns I have done are her patterns, or patterns I have gotten from her.
From your grandmother? From your grandmother?
From my great-grandmother.
From your great-grandmother. You've done patterns from your great-grandmother. Okay, that's so very cool. So tell me a little bit about those patterns. That's really interesting. So did you have the quilt to be made originally, or did you just have a pattern for the quilt?
I just had a pattern for the quilt. Actually, my sister had one that was a gem quilt where it was using paper piece, believe foundation paper piecing, where they use newspaper, and it was cutting out like triangles and then having a a pink center and then sewing 2 borders and then using scraps to extend it.
That's really cool.
So I saw my sister making this, and so I have that pattern, and I've never made it, but to me that's on my wish list of something to do. But the things
really cool.
that I have from my great grandmother was like a parasol girl applique and also a bouquet girl applique, and those are things that I had used material that we had from dresses, growing up, and I had put it together. In fact, one that I used to hand quilt, and this one I'm doing right now is a parasol girl, which I started when I was 19, and now I'm 56. And I used to hand quilt, but I'm working away from that because just there's time issues, and also my eyesight isn't what it used to be. And so I had gotten into machine quilting. And so it's kind of like, this is, I know this is going to be the last quilt I hand quilt.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
And,
How long?
and also,
so yeah, go ahead. And also what?
I was going to say, but also my quilting's evolved. And so it's like the quality of what it was when I was 19 isn't what I would do today if I were to start from scratch. And so in some ways, that's part of why I just don't really have a real desire to work on it that much. But I will finish it just because.
Right? Yeah, it's interesting. It's so funny that so many people, they talk about like, their first quilts or early quilts and that they don't finish them. And we sort of judge ourselves, right? Like we get judgy about our abilities to begin with. But I imagine that quilt is just so cool because you have worked on it, for a long time. So that's really, I'd love to see it. It's really cool. All right. So tell me about your quilting life. What do you like to do with quilting?
Okay. When I graduated from college, I got a job in a little tiny dirt oil town. It was a phone interview, and I drove into town. So I was living in New York at the time, and I wanted to go someplace exciting. So I moved to Texas. And and I drove into town, and it was looking like a ghost town. And it was just, and I thought, oh no, what did I do?
How old are you when you do this? How old were you when you did this?
I think I was 22.
Oh my gosh. That is very brave.
Well, but see, I'm a middle child, so I'm the 4th out of 7 children. And to me, if you look at birth order things, that's really typical for the middle child to get up and move across the country. So I was in this little town, and I had realized I love to sew, but it was when I was sewing, during school, I would stop and sew something like just for fun every once in a while. And growing up, I hadn't realized I enjoyed it. But at that point, it was like I had my first job and I could go out and buy clothes. And to me, I didn't get the satisfaction from making clothes, but I wanted to do something. And so my recreation was I got satellite, I think it was cable TV, but I started quilting. So then I was kind of like multitasking and not feeling like I was wasting my time. And in this little town where there was nothing to do.
So where did you get your fabric if you're in a little teeny tiny town? How did you start quilting?
Let's see. I had it was a Charlie Brown quilt that I had. I think my mother set me up where we had this. I don't remember what it was, but it was like paints in a tube, and so it was like doing these Charlie Brown motifs. And of course, my older sister, she was always the go-getter. She would finish things up, and I had taken that with me. And let's see, and there was that bouquet girl quilt that I had been working on. So I had the pieces, so 12 squares, and it was embroidery around the edge. I don't remember if I had finished embroidering at that time or not. And then, and then there was this other quilt, and there was a Walmart, and that's where I got my material. And I think the thing that got me started was I was invited to a baby shower, and I went in and was looking at different bottles and things, and it's like I thought, I'll just make a baby quilt. And so I bought the material, and really and it was flannel. And of course, now I realize flannel isn't what you want to do in Texas because it's too hot.
Yeah.
But then there was a green, and it had all these different shades, and I really liked it. And so I just bought a bunch, and I went home and I sewed it up. And so it was kind of like a staggered just squares.
That's really cool.
And there was someone I met at church, and they were a builder, and I talked to them about making some quilt frames for me. And, so I kind of contracted out, and so I got myself some quilt frames, and so that was kind of my recreation. And
that's really cool. That's really cool.
So I guess, so that was my start.
Yeah. So now what does your quilting look like? Like, what do you do? How often do you quilt? What kind of stuff do you like?
Okay, quilting's my therapy, and let's see. Okay, so I guess you're familiar with Tennessee Waltz.
Yeah.
I went into a quilt shop, and I saw that pattern. I just thought it was beautiful, and so I decided to buy the material and make it, and that was when I was going to be absolutely perfect on. And okay, maybe let me back up. My mother was very inexact. Like, her sewing was very inexact. But when I saw that, it's like, oh, I want to do something where all my seams meet and it looks nice. And it has a very flowy look, so circular pattern to it, but yet everything's straight squared. So it's a 9-patch variation.
Yeah, right.
And so it was off, and then I trimmed it down, and I didn't check it. I just sewed it together. And so every intersection where they meet, it's a 1/4 inch off. And that was 26 years ago when my let's see, youngest daughter, was born. And so it's kind of like, I look at that and I say, this was me trying to be perfect, and everything was a 1/4 inch off. But I laugh about it because, to me, I look at that and see the progressions that you make. And so now I feel like, and then I started thinking, okay, if it takes me about a year to make a quilt, and you're going to put, like, okay, for instance, 6 to 8 weeks into hand quilting it, then what you do with the top needs to be of the same value of the work that you're putting in after that. And so I started, so I feel like my quilts are more artistic.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know if you've seen like twist and turn Bargello quilts. Okay. And so, so it's like I do stuff with that where it's like I really love colors, and a lot of my quilts are really strong geometrics. And
that's really cool. Will you send us images of it? So we make a web page for each person, and so it would be great to listen. They can then sort of see what you're talking about. But yeah, do you like the bright color? The Bargello quilts are just like, they're amazing, and they are yours really bright and colorful? Is that what you do?
Okay, so what I'm doing now is I have 6 children, and they're getting married. And so as they get married, I sit there and say, okay, I'll make you something, and it can be whatever you want.
Right.
And so this is for my oldest daughter for her wedding quilt, but she's 26, and she's no hopes in sight. And so I'm thinking that now my goal is to get a long arm quilting machine for myself. And I have it planned out, but I still have 3 children at home. And so I feel like I'll probably get it about the time that they're leaving home, and because I'll need to have a new hobby.
Right, totally. So now, when you're looking for a long arm, do you know which long arm are you on the market? Are you shopping for a long arm? What are you looking for in a long arm?
I've been looking for a long time. There is a local quilt shop, and it's a sewing machine shop, and they have one, and it's $12,000, and I could get something a lot cheaper online. And I know if I went with a different line, but I was thinking I want to go with them just to support the local thing, to support the local business, and then that you'd have the classes and the talk through and
the support, and somebody who knows how to do it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm in the market too right now, and I'm kind of confused by all of it. There's a lot of variation out there in pricing, and small companies and big companies. I just don't know how you even start to think about it,
My aunt has a long arm quilting machine, and so I went up to see my father last month, and and I had wanted to go see her for a long time, and I went to see what she does, and
Yeah.
she has one that's computerized, and you know, and she showed me how she set it up and all. But I don't want to be computerized because it's like what I'm hungry for